Hello and welcome to the 15th video in this series Programming Simple Floppy Robin using Cocos2dx for Android. Last video we had our splash scene up on the board, implemented with a huge amount of duplicated code. Now what we need to do is implement our game manager, which will be a singleton class used to manage settings and the running of the different scenes in our application. If you're not familiar with the singleton pattern, I'd recommend you quickly type it into Google and have a quick look how it works, but essentially all it is something like we've already seen with the CC director, whereas it inside appdelegate.cpp. Here, the shared director, it simply means there's one example of this class hanging around for the lifetime of the application, and that's exactly what we're going to create here, but we'll call it a game manager. So I right click on classes and new file and call next and see game manager. And unfortunately there's a little bit of setup involved in all of this singleton, but once it's up and running everything's pretty much okay. So I want to make the class called CGame manager, and don't forget the semicolon on the end. Good, it's there. And now just to set things up, first of all we'll deal with the public part, and the main key of the whole thing is that we have a static function that returns a pointer to one of our an instance of our class, and that's called instance. And in fact I think I got this example off the Cocos2dx website itself, or in the documentation somewhere anyway, of doing this way. We're going to add one function into this and we're going to call it run scene, and it's going to take an integer called scene, so the number of the scene inside. If we go into constants.h, you'll see that I've already added down the bottom here a define of scene splash and a define for scene game. So they're just constants 0 and 1, so please add those in. If I'm brutally honest, I forgot to remove them when I was preparing the code for this video and just making sure everything in my head was straight, and I forgot to take them back out again. So once you've added those in, we've got these two things here. We now need to look at the private section of the CGame manager. And here's where it's a little more complicated, but I suggest if you're not familiar with the pattern, you just copy this out with our constructor inside the private section. We also have our copy constructor as well, which is takes a CGame manager, and obviously it's a constant reference inside there. And then the other thing as well is we want the operator to overload the equals operator. Again, you don't need to worry about any of this if it's confusing. And why doesn't it highlight operator for me? Never mind. Which is also CGame manager and constant like this. And then last but not least, but most important, is the actual instance that we hold throughout the life of the application itself, declared statically here, and we'll call it p instance, a pointer to our instance. So that's now set up our game manager singleton, of which one will only exist, and we'll use this instance function here, the static one here, to basically access this private static object of a CGame manager. So into the implementation file then for this, what have I forgotten? Of course, up here I want to include Cocos2dx or Cocos2d.h, and then inside the implementation at the top here, before we do anything else, let's just do the using statement so that we can include all of the we can include the Cocos2d namespace. So the first thing is our pointer to our static CGame. It always bothers me when the IntelliSense doesn't pick something up, because it's usually pretty good. So double colon, and then we have our private instance, our pointer to our instance, so it's null. So that's there and ready to be used, and when the application starts, obviously it's set to null. And what we need to do now then is set up the function that we had declared here, the static function, to return that instance. And all we basically do is we say if that instance doesn't exist, then we'll create it and then return it. So here we then have instance So it just returns our pointer, and now what we do is we say that if not and p instance, so if it's not been created, then let's create it. And then we just simply return our instance. So it's not really rocket science at all. It just means that from now on, whenever we want the game manager, we use this instance, and it'll make sure that we're always using this one here, and if it hasn't been created yet, it'll create it for us so that we can then use it. So the only other thing that's remaining to do is to actually have the run scene with the int scene here, where we want to be able to say what scene we want to run. So we'll just go into the include here, and we'll include our hello world scene because we'll need that, and we'll also include our wrong brackets as usual, our C splash scene as well. The first thing we'll do here is get a pointer to a scene. That's a CC scene object, and set that equal to null. And now we'll see what's actually being sent in as an argument into the function. Now if we had lots of scenes in the game, we might want to do a switch here, but we can just do this with an if-else for now because we're not going to have many scenes in our game. So we can say that if scene equals k scene, and that tells me there with no IntelliSense that I've forgotten to include the constants. So we can say that if scene equals k scene game, then we'll say that the p scene equals, and it'll be hello world scene, like so. Else, if and scene is equal to k scene splash, then we can say p scene equals, and then c splash layer scene, like so. So this gets a pointer to the scene that we want to run. Remember, these scene functions then create the layer and add it to the scene before returning it. And now what we need to do is tell the director to run the scene. And there are two things you have to, well, there's one key thing you have to remember here. If it's already running a scene, you have to call replace scene. And if it's not, then you just call run with scene. That's the only sort of gotcha in there. So we say cc director and shared director to get the singleton. As we say if the cc, and we say running with scene, oh sorry, not running with scene, whoops, get running scene is equal to null, so there's no scene currently running, then we can say cc director, shared director, and now we can say run with scene, and then our p scene, like so. Otherwise, there's already a scene running, so we need to replace that current scene, so we say cc director and shared director and replace scene, and then p scene. And that's actually all there is to it. So when we want to run a scene, we simply call cGameManager and run instance and run scene. So now that we've done that, we can go into our appdelegate.cpp, and we can take the splash screen, oops, sorry for the traffic noises, the splash screen out and include the constants, and now we can include our cGameManager, like so. And now down here in the run with scene here, instead of doing the pDirector run with scene, we'll just comment this out for now. What we'll do is we'll get our game manager, and we'll say cGameManager, instance, and now we'll say run scene, and then we'll say k scene splash. I'll just build this and check there are no errors before I go to the splash screen, and it seems to have built good. And now I just want to take this line here, and inside our splashscene.cpp, inside the run game screen here, we'll now type k scene and game. So let's now run the application and stop because I've forgotten to include the game manager. So let's just include then and cGameManager .h, and I'm just going to actually put that there and save and build. Okay, and now run. And now you can see we've got our splash screen, and then after 4 seconds or so it flips then to our game screen, which plays as normal. Okay, so that's that then. That was actually pretty simple. And the good thing about our game manager class is we're going to add some more things to this. So we've got our running scene, but we'll be adding the playing effects, loading effects, playing the music, and it'll also be used for some sound settings and things like that. So I hope that video has made some sense. Went quite quickly through the code. Again, singleton pattern in Google is probably the easiest way, but it's just to remember that we're always just creating this one instance of it and then always using that. So next video then we'll get on with the sound settings and playing some sound effects. So thanks very much for watching. Comments, questions, criticisms welcome as always on YouTube.